The Super Speedway Podcast is a Dream Bigger media production. For news, photos, show notes, and information about advertising on the podcast, visit www.thesuperspeedway.com.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Super Speedway.
Welcome to episode 74 of the Super Speedway Podcast, recorded Sunday, August 12th, 2018. I'm your host, Eric Young, and my co-host, James Cush, is off on vacation, so I managed to find somebody at Michigan International Speedway, Aaron Bearden from Kicking the Tires. Aaron, how's it going?
I'm good. You made a major downgrade, dude. You let the guy who makes dad jokes and terrible puns come on a radio show.
The puns have been epic this weekend, for sure.
Debatable.
I've been enjoying them.
Highly debatable.
Aaron Kicking the Tires, and you're working with Jeff Gluck now, doing some stuff with him.
Y'all pretty much go wherever they send me at this point. If you have any ideas or other places. Yeah, it's Kicking the Tires is my main one for NASCAR. I do some other stuff on the open wheel side, but I do that, and then I also do a newsletter called The Morning Warm-Up that I started with Jeff Gluck. It's my baby, but he kind of assists with it, I guess is the way to describe it.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the Consumers Energy 400 Michigan International Speedway. The big three came through, and Harvick gets the win this time, and there's not a whole lot else to say, is there?
Yeah. The name was fitting because I had to consume a lot of energy things to keep going. I drink a lot of coffee.
There you go.
Kevin Harvick really took it to the field today. Won both stages, won the race. It was one of those days, I guess. I mean, we got to like the midway point of stage 2. We're getting toward the end of that when all the cautions and craziness had kind of died out, and you looked, and oh, look there's the big three, 1, 2, 3. And Truex kind of had an off day, and Kyle Busch, he slid back on a restart there and never seemed to get back. But as long as Harvick was out front, I don't think anybody was going to have anything for him today.
Yeah, Austin Dillon tried to give it his best shot by taking 2 tires on the pit stop, gets out ahead of him, and held the lead for, a lap before Harvick was able to get back by him.
Yeah, he said on pit road he wish I think he wish he could have adjusted his track bar more there at the start. He thought, it's always great to say this in retrospect, obviously, but he seemed to think that if he could have been able to fend Harvick off for a lap or two, Harvick was pretty loose behind him there at the end. He thought maybe if he could fend him off for a lap or two, he would have had a shot at holding him off. But if we saw what happened there to Dillon at the end, I'm not even sure it would have mattered. But still, good run for Dillon and that RCR team. Just didn't quite have enough for Kevin.
Yeah, I would say finished 4th, right?
Yeah.
4th place, I'd say, is pretty much a win for them guys right now anyway.
Yeah, I think their best finish after Daytona before today was 12th, I believe.
Right.
Some stat dude's going to look that up and tweet at me. You're wrong, Aaron.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Yeah, he'd had a very good run by RCR standards. He was top 10 most of the day, crept up, actually moved forward naturally during the race. It wasn't a fluke.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they did stretch it a little bit with fuel to try and stay out there, but still, it was a small strategy play to be able to spend less time on pit road. It wasn't like a major just, wing it to try and see what happens. He was there legit.
No, yeah, he was. It kind of in a weird way reminded me of 2015. I don't know if very many people remember that, but in 2015, I think he started toward the back, and they did a pit strategy that got him up front early in the race, and he led what at the time I think was the most laps he had ever led in a race. I don't know the stat or anything of that regard, but in that race he kept himself up front most of the day after that, and he ended up finishing 4th. Well, lo and behold, we get to today. He didn't necessarily need any pit strategy to get there, but it's sort of the same result. He comes up, has a good run, really should have finished 2nd. We saw he had a vibration there at the end. I think he thought a tire was coming undone, but comes home 4th, and that for that team, especially where we're at right now and leaning toward the playoffs after the regular season that's a huge result and gives them at least a little bit of hope going into the postseason.
Definitely. It was definitely a single groove, or mostly, I guess not so much single groove, but just hard to pass today. It was, the one thing I found really interesting was at the beginning of the race we had these guys up front, and the big three were up front at one point. Yeah. And then we hit this point in the middle of the race where suddenly there were different guys up front. Brad Keselowski was up there. Austin Dillon was up there. Ryan Blaney was up there. And like the whole thing flipped, but Harvick was still there, of course.
Yeah.
So kept that a little less interesting with him up there. But
yeah, sure.
So Harvick, he gets his 44th win today, ties him with Bill Elliott now all time. I think he's 17th all time, I believe is what it is.
Something in that range.
Yeah.
I know he's top 20 now.
So just clicking him off what are your thoughts this season? Obviously, everybody's talking about the big three. There's no way of knowing for sure if all three will make it to Homestead. They likely will unless somebody screws up. But is Harvick the strongest of the three?
Ooh, I don't know. Well, now Dale is the only big three I need. No, but I think it's really hard to say, right? I mean, yes, Harvick wins now, but 3 weeks ago we thought Kyle Busch was the top one.
Right.
I think Truex is definitely considered probably the underdog of the three. If you
I think they like being the underdog.
If you can even have such a thing as an underdog, he's there. You've got
Though he had a performance like Harvick at Kentucky.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know that there really is any one team that you can say, oh, that's your champion, like your favorite to win that title right now, especially with NASCAR's playoff format now, because
right.
Harvick might be the guy to beat, but if he comes and they have something go wonky, he gets a loose wheel with 100 to go at Homestead, it doesn't matter.
Right. All those bonus points, when Truex was running away with it and had all those bonus points last year, it's easy to say, well, he's got a spot in Homestead because only 3 drivers can win going into Homestead.
Yeah.
But all 3 of these guys can't get in on points. They're going to have to win races too.
In theory.
In theory.
I think it's really going to come down to probably that next to last round. If we don't see any surprises, any huge upsets, if we don't see something like when Jimmy Johnson and Kevin Harvick won a few years ago or something like that,
right?
I don't think there's going to be anything that knocks them out. But to your point, if something crazy goes down, somebody could still win a Martinsville. It's a short track.
Yeah.
In theory, that's the place where you could see it. And then from there, I think it comes down to if somebody can excel at the right time or do like Harvick did last year where he has a quiet year, but he delivers a strong run in one of the last races of the season, gets a win. Next thing you know, he's in the championship 4.
Right.
And he ended up, he was third to Truex and Busch last year, but it put him in the picture. And I think it's going to take a run like that for something to quell the big 3 with as much of an advantage as they have now.
I agree with that. It'll be really interesting to see just who is going to stand out when it matters, because right now, like you said, I think it's definitely Harvick and Busch kind of trading shots with Truex sneaking in there every now and then and hanging on there, and it's going to come right down to it. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of track it over the course of the year. It's totally different from a few years ago, we kind of didn't know who was going to win or who was going to do what. 2016,
yeah,
there were a couple guys you thought were favorites, and then Jimmy Johnson wins a championship after one of the quieter years of his career.
Who knows? It could still happen.
And then last
Jimmy.
Year, it's Jimmy. They could do it at any time, especially with Chevy slowly trending in the right direction. But last year, we had the driver. I guess Truex. You could almost say Big 2 the way Busch came on in the second half of the year, but Truex was clearly the guy. But this year, yet again, we've just been given a completely different set of circumstances. And honestly, with the Big 3 running as strong as they have, the thing I've been watching more than anything is who's going to end up being that guy that gets to play the underdog for
What I was going to ask you that, who's the 4th guy? Nobody stands out. I mean, and Boyer has 2 wins, but one of those was a rain-shortened win, and he doesn't consider himself in that category quite yet.
I don't think anybody does.
I mean, there's nobody quite ready to latch onto that, and
it's going to come down to who can peak in that last round,
right?
And I think that's where you almost lean toward Boyer because Martinsville's in that last round.
Definitely.
And you have to remember the first of his 2 wins and the one that wasn't in a rain delayed race, albeit it was postponed today by snow of all things, was Boyer at Martinsville. So I think that if you're gonna make me pick one right off the bat, if it's gonna be off a win, I'm gonna say Boyer. If it's gonna go off consistency, it's hard to say. It could be a Logano or a Keselowski, somebody like that who can put together 3 great runs like we saw Brad do last year. He kind of snuck in there. It took Chase and Denny having their little spat for it to happen, but I think it's going to be something like that. I don't know that there's one guy. It's going to be either somebody's going to get that win, probably at Martinsville if it's going to happen, or maybe Texas.
Right.
And if not, it's going to be who can get 3 top 5s in a row and kind of sneak their way in. And I don't know that any one guy has been consistent enough to say, hey, it's going to be him.
I think I agree with you. Now, Brad Keselowski had probably one of the best championship celebrations at Homestead with the giant boot of beer. Can you imagine a Clint Boyer championship celebration?
Bush. It'd be entertaining to watch, that's for sure.
Definitely.
When I think of Boyer late season now, I think of that Phoenix deal with Gordon back in 2012. It'd be interesting to see him on the other end of the spectrum with the other extreme celebrating. I think that would be Very interesting post-race press conference.
I think so, definitely. Any post-race press conference is interesting with Boyer, anytime he's in the media center for that matter.
Oh, for sure.
I guess the strangest thing that happened today, probably worth talking about, Ty Dillon hit something on the backstretch, hit the wall a ton. I haven't seen somebody hit the wall that hard at Michigan in a long time.
Yeah.
It looked like a battery. There was some debate about whether it could be a battery because most teams only run one battery. But whatever it was, that was crazy.
It kind of looked like, like when Apple puts out the new iPhones,
Right.
And then the old iPhones like suddenly go. It kind of felt like that,
Yeah.
We see there's the battery and it's gone. It was. I don't know what was going on with that. A lot of people thought it might be tungsten, but most of the people I know, the 43 team tweeted that it was a battery, and Darrell Wallace Jr., Bubba Wallace, was right behind that when it happened, so they would have had the perspective on that. And I thought it was peculiar. Timmy Hill exited the race shortly thereafter, and the reason for the exit was battery related.
We might know soon about whether.
Yeah, I got an inkling that might have had something to do with it.
It could be. Could be. Anything else to talk about with this race? I think that pretty much covers it, doesn't it?
Yeah, Keelan Harvick got to live out my 6-year-old dream.
Keelan was great. Keelan gets to ride with Harvick in the post-race victory lap. Comes in and does the press conference with Harvick too.
Yes.
I have 6-year-old boys, so it's interesting to see the perspective and know how they would be sitting up there. He had some like one-word answers, but it was adorable.
Yes, it was. It's been interesting to watch him kind of in the last few years. He's really started to show his personality, and he is one of the more. How would I say this? He's one of the less shy kids in terms of like all the drivers.
He's
most
been
of
right
them,
there in the middle of it from the very beginning too.
Yeah, most of them kind of ease back, but Keelan likes to be right up there, kind of in it. He likes to be with his dad.
Yeah. And
this weekend in particular, I guess it was a father-son weekend. It sounds like they had a little bit of fun. Harvick said he crashed a golf cart. I don't know. He's already getting racy, so I guess at least one Harvick had trouble this weekend behind the wheel, but
not the one that mattered though.
Yeah, Keelan's a fun one to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
Kevin's been giving him a lot of spotlight with all these wins.
I have a feeling Mom might have some things to say when they get home, but
that finish might be encumbered.
There you go. So I guess we always kind of hit on some news here. We're doing this. Usually we do this in the middle of the week, so more news comes out. But I guess the big news this weekend was the silly season. A lot of talk about where people are going. There's talk that Kurt Busch is going to go to Ganassi possibly, and all that. There's a ton of dominoes to fall there. Anything you have to say on any of that? Any comments on any of? Obviously, it's real early, and it kind of just we went from, well, we don't know what's happening with Kurt Busch to all of a sudden here's a bunch of moves that might happen.
Yeah, it's like there's no dominoes. Oh, dominoes are falling everywhere.
Right.
No, really, I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I know the reports were from a lot of outlets that you would mostly consider reputable.
Right, they seem pretty credible.
Yeah, so it's not something that I think you can just discard or ignore. I think there might be some serious stake behind the claims, I guess.
Right.
If it's true, makes you wonder what's next for some of these guys, because obviously the reports were saying that Busch is leaning towards Chip Ganassi Racing right now. That was kind of the thing, and some people say he's going to replace Jamie McMurray. Some people say, well, McMurray's going to stay. It might be a third team. It's hard to know for sure.
Right.
They both have contracts expiring at the end of this year, to my knowledge, so it's feasible.
Right.
I guess the question then becomes, one, if Busch does go there, what happens to that Stewart-Haas seat? Because I don't know if you've been watching. We just saw Kevin Harvick win his 7th race this year.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that are probably sizing up that Stewart-Haas seat if it comes available.
And I believe Gene Haas said on Sirius that he has no intention of getting rid of that team. So
yeah,
they'll need somebody to fill that seat if he goes somewhere.
Yeah, I'll put my resume in.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I
Although I did the ride along with Richard Childress this morning, and it was a different experience than what I'm used to. So I've never done the pace car ride along before, and there's
really?
so many G's in the corner that you don't even think about when you.
Yeah, and
hit
you
it.
weren't at race pace. Try those G's when you go in.
Yeah, we were doing about 120 in the turn.
Yeah, try 219.
Yeah, no. it was different for sure. The other one that's interesting is Martin Truex Jr. He hasn't signed his contract yet with Furniture Row. There's talk about Toyota because they're not signed with Toyota yet.
Yeah.
And then I hadn't heard any talk about the possibility that wouldn't be a team at all. Mm-hmm. But now there's talk about that, or Truex might go somewhere else. So that's another huge domino, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. It'd be hard to imagine a scenario in which a defending champion with 4 wins that's considered one of a so-quoted big 3 would lose his ride. That would... That'd be a surprise, but it is interesting to see that nothing has become concrete about that yet. Nothing's popped up.
I think Truex is probably in the best position of his career coming to the end of a contract, though.
Yeah, you would think that he would be a hot commodity anywhere. Obviously, funding is a big aspect of racing. It's something that's unique to our sport, but with as much success as he's had and as strong as he's been on a consistent basis, it's hard to imagine that Truex wouldn't end up with something, and it's even harder to imagine Furniture Row wanting to buck the system too much with how strong they're running overall.
Exactly. I'm sure it has a lot to do with just the right things need to fall into place. And
yeah, I'll say this. If something crazy does happen there one way or the other, I think it will say a lot. If a team that's winning championships can't, and a driver that seems to be in the prime of his career and arguably one of the top 2 or 3 drivers in the whole sport right now, if they can't make it work to stay together and keep that rolling, I think that's going to say a lot. And I'll leave it at that.
This year is going to say a lot in general. I mean, obviously we've seen the deal with Hattori Racing and the Truck Series with Brett Moffitt, who's performed really well this year, and they've struggled with sponsorship, but they now have everything kind of lined up through the rest of the season. But at the Truck Series, you kind of maybe don't expect it for that winning of a driver, but you expect it a little bit more. But in the Cup Series, we have the Truex deal. We have Jimmy Johnson, who's looking for sponsorship for next year too. And so, I mean, it's going to say a lot about where our sport is for sure.
Yeah, and it's not just exclusive to NASCAR either.
No,
I know.
Definitely.
I cover a lot of IndyCar, and we went through this whole deal with Scott Dixon a couple years ago with Target. It's not something that's unique to any one driver or circumstance. It's something we're seeing all around in motorsports right now.
You mean NASCAR's not doomed? I don't know. Have you been on Twitter?
It depends on who you ask, but no, I don't think any of them are quite doomed just yet. I would hesitate on all that, but it is disheartening.
Yeah,
I will admit that it does.
Oh, things were great back in the 2000s when everybody was just throwing money in and everybody wanted to be on a car. But
yeah, it's not even necessarily just that. It's just as a child or somebody younger in the sport, when you're naive, you always like to think, oh, if I've got all the talent in the world, I'm going to get there.
Right.
And we still see cases where it happens.
Definitely.
I mean, look at Kyle Larson. Ganassi takes a chance on him, finds the sponsorship kind of to make it work, and Larson's championship contender last year. I would say if Chevrolet can hit their marks, he becomes a dark horse immediately.
Yeah. This
year,
I think all he's got to do is get to Homestead, but he's so strong at Homestead that if he can get there, he's going to be somebody that you're going to look at for possibility. He's been named as the 4th all year long. He hasn't won a race yet, so he starts clicking off a couple wins.
Yeah, he's one that you always have to keep an eye on. But I don't know. It is disheartening sometimes to think of a guy like in Truex's position or something like that just might lose out, not based on talent, but just based on, sorry, man, nobody wanted to step up and sponsor. It is disheartening to see, especially when we have like Ben Wallace from the NBA in here earlier. That was pure talent. He gets to the Detroit Pistons and helps lead them to a championship. He never had to worry about, is my sponsor staying with me? It was, I have to show up, do my job, and we can win a championship. Yeah. It's hard when you see that, and then we see the complete opposite dynamic in our sport, but it's part of what racing's always been. You adapt to it and you live with it.
That's what it's all about. All right, Aaron, let's talk a little bit about you.
Oh, dear. Nobody wants to hear that.
Right. So when I stumbled across you the first time, it was a few years ago at Eldora. You were trying to get credentials for the Truck Series race out there.
Yeah.
How'd you get here? Where'd you come from? How did you get into this whole deal?
So when I was about 3, I think, I went to my first qualifying day at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. My parents have gone to the Brickyard 400 since the inaugural. They started watching racing in, I think the early 80s. Okay. Because summertime, they wanted a sport to watch. It was pretty much either racing or golf. And it's my understanding golf wasn't a whole lot of fun to watch in the 80s. Because they didn't have the cameras they have now. It was if the players that you wanted to see weren't performing well, you didn't get to see them, really. That's my understanding from hearing from them. And they found that kind of distasteful. They didn't like it, so they started watching racing. And so by the time I came around, they'd been watching for 10, 15 years. And so I learned my numbers from racing. I learned a lot of words. I used to try to say good inch, like good wrench for Dale Sr.
Nice.
And I just always loved it. First race was an IROC race, the Brickyard, everything else, just always enjoyed it. And I never even dreamed of interacting with it, really. Right. But when I was in junior high, I used to write stories. And I'd write one of them was 150 plus pages in Microsoft Word. And then our computer died and I lost it.
Oh, man.
Knowing what it was about, it might have been for the better. It was probably garbage. But notwithstanding, I like to write. And when I got into college, I started tracking racing more and more, and it became easier to track, I would say, because of social media. You could really invest in it
Right.
and feel like part of the sport. And it finally got to a point one day where I was like, I want to do something with it and see. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to break in. I never dreamed of all this, but
Right.
I just wanted to see like what people did in racing, or how I wanted to learn more about how it worked, I guess. So I started asking people like, what can you even do? And I messaged one day. I sent a thing. I think it was actually Jeff Gluck. He was doing like a Q&A type of deal,
Okay.
like he used to do on Twitter a lot, and he still kind of does. And I remember I just asked him like, what can somebody do to start in racing, or to get an idea what goes on with it? And he responded, you should make a blog. Start writing. I was like, well, how convenient. I like to write.
Right.
So my junior year, like in between my junior and senior year, around that time of college, which was 2014, 2015, I started a blog. I called it Aaron Talks Racing because, quite frankly, I couldn't think of any better name. I think some of the articles are still out there if you want to cringe. Just started writing. Didn't think anything of it. Just having fun with it. Well, people started sending me messages like, hey, man, I like what you write. You're doing okay. It's fun to watch you. I was like, well, if people like it, I guess I'll keep trying to do it.
Right.
So then it became, well, ARCA and stuff's coming around. Maybe I can sneak out to a racetrack, actually talk to a driver, kind of have some fun with it. So I remember I sent an email to Winchester Speedway.
Okay.
And they gave me a credential for the ARCA race in 2014. And I was as lost as you would imagine. I went out there, kind of tried to figure out what I was doing. Spent 2 days following ARCA, having a good time. It was 30 minutes from my college campus. I went to Ball State. And just had a blast. Ken Schrader was on the pole. Brandon Jones won.
Okay.
He's for Joe Gibbs now. He won his first ARCA race that day for Turner Scott Motorsports. So I had a lot of fun. Kind of got to know some of these guys. Got to talk to some of them. Kind of shake off the jitters,
Right.
And from there it became, well, people liked my stuff after that. So I was like, well, I'll try another one. I sent like a desperate plea to Eldora. They had their second edition of what was then the Mud Summer Classic. Now, obviously, it's the Eldora Dirt Derby.
Right.
And I ended up getting to cover that. Why he gave me a shot, I don't know. Thank you, Roger Slack. I think, honestly, there weren't very many people. I don't know if maybe they didn't think it was going to be as big of a deal.
Well, the first year was huge. Everybody came out. And then the second year, it wasn't the big spectacle.
I was there as a fan the first year.
Yeah, so was I.
Yeah, so the second year I got a credential to it and went and kind of got my name out there a little bit, talked to like the Chris Knights of the world.
Yep.
Just kind of stuck my foot in the door a little bit. Not too much came of it, but I kept writing. At the end of the year, I did like 2 more ARCA races too. And then at the end of the year, a couple people from Front Stretch reached out to me, said, hey, you're going to write for us next year? I'm going to talk. And I said, sure, why not? So then I spent a couple years writing for Front Stretch, and they got me credentials for my first Cup weekend at Kentucky Speedway in 2015. I slept in the back of my 98 GMC Sonoma at a Love's Truck Stop, and I covered NASCAR at Kentucky.
I've thought about doing that, actually, sleeping in the car.
I've done it more than once.
Yeah.
And then from there it became, I met like Gluck and all them, and kind of got my foot in a little more, and then it became, let's do Indy. And then I only cried a little bit, going to my home track and covering my lifelong race. And then Chicago, and then 2016 came, and I'm like, oh, let's do some more. They bumped me up a little bit. Next thing I know, I'm going to like Watkins Glen and stuff like that, and moved over to kicking the tires for 2017. Got an annual credential, and I've just been wherever I can go. I'll just go. It's not. I don't make a ton of money. I make enough where I can kind of set a little bit of a travel schedule and have fun with it. But people just keep supporting me and they keep pushing me. I keep trying to get better. I'm always asking for feedback. And I've always loved motorsports. And I think you have to have that passion to really stick around with it and try to pursue it at this point. So
I agree. I've
just been trying to share that passion with everybody I can and kind of tell the stories from the sport that I've always loved. I never expected to get to anything like this. I didn't expect to cover a race. I didn't expect for anybody to care. I didn't even have a friend in racing before I started doing this. Now it's kind of blown up way beyond what I ever could have expected.
And you're doing more than just NASCAR. You do all kinds of motorsports.
Yeah, whatever I can get to.
Right.
It's I've done, I think Gateway will be my 10th IndyCar race this year, maybe 9. I think this was my 7th Cup race. I've done some truck races. I've done super late models. Did the Little 500 in Anderson Speedway. I do some short track stuff. I'll do just about anything because there are great stories and great people in all levels of motorsport. In every series, there's always a story worth telling.
Right.
And that to me is what I wanted to make my, I don't want to say my brand, hashtag brand.
Right.
That's what I wanted to make my, I guess my mindset around is if there's a story worth telling, I want to tell it. And the longer I go along, the more I really lean towards that.
Right.
I would rather tell an interesting story about like somebody who persevered and made it and had like this long journey and does a great job than write about the guy who finished third and was kind of disappointed with finishing third again.
Right.
Which I don't even who finished third. Was it Kyle? I'm not naming any driver. It was just a generic story.
Yeah.
So don't link that, people.
Right.
That was just spur of the moment. Like I don't know. I love racing and I like sharing it. So.
Well, and you've drawn the eye of Jeff Gluck. You're helping him out, or you're doing the newsletter. You were already doing kind of a newsletter thing on Facebook, right? He said.
Yeah, I was doing a thing on Facebook. I would post like just bullet points. It was like 8 to 10 bullet points about, hey, here's this, here's what happened yesterday, here's what's going on today. If they had a schedule, I'd post a picture that had the weekend schedule with it. And then I just started calling it the morning warm-up. Actually, I was at an IndyCar race when I came up with the idea. And if you go to IndyCar, a lot of times, especially at the road courses, they'll do a warm-up in the morning before the race. Like it's not really a practice session per se. They get like a few laps to kind of shake the car down.
Right.
And I was like, well, that makes sense. Got to shake things out for the day. I'll just call it the morning warm-up. And
there you go.
He tried a newsletter the year before and just didn't have the time to commit to it. So I found out about that. He found out about that. We kind of crossed paths and we're like, hey, let's try it.
Awesome.
So far, it's been a lot of fun.
Been going pretty well, I think.
About a month and a half in, doing okay. It's fan supported now. We have a Patreon for it.
I was going to ask you about that. Go ahead and plug your Patreon page.
Dude, I'm terrible.
I know you hate that.
I hate plugging things like that, dude. I hate plugging myself. If it's good enough, support me, but fine. But yeah, I have a Patreon. I think it's patreon.com/Aaron Bearden 93. I think you can look it up on Patreon. I'm sure it'll pop up. Just look up my name. But yeah, I write that newsletter each day. Makes enough. It had a very strong initial support group come in, and I've really enjoyed that. It was very humbling to me because, again, I come from not expecting anybody to even care about what I was writing, let alone want to put financial incentive towards it for me. So it means a lot. I really am humbled by it, and if you guys want to go support it, if you're listening to this, by all means. I'm not going to require it of you. I'm not going to ask it of you. The newsletter's free to anybody that wants to sign up. You don't have to sign up yet either. You can follow me on social media and put up with my puns and everything else if you'd like. But
yeah, beware.
Yeah, they're bad. Posted a picture of Jeffrey Earnhardt with a dog today. Wasn't good. Said life's rough.
Nice. Yeah, there's no good puns though.
No, well, they're all good because they're all bad.
Right. As long as you know they're bad, then they're good.
I joke, you've got kids. I don't. I say I've got the dad jokes and the dad bod, but no kids. Yeah. I've got all the best aspects of the dad life with none of the commitment.
Yeah.
It's good. It's
My
good.
boys would very much appreciate your humor.
Yes. Clutch.
I had a bunch of questions prepared for you, but you pretty much answered them.
If you have any, ask away.
What advice would you give to somebody who wants to get into this? I mean, I've been doing it myself too, and I mean, my advice is just do something. But I mean, what's your thought on it?
Number one, don't expect anything.
Right.
Don't go into it too lofty of expectations. Go into it and take it for what it is, and really cherish what you get, and it'll always be rewarding to you.
Yeah.
Consistency's key. Even I struggle with that sometimes. I work a day job outside of this. So sometimes during the week it's hard for me to get the time.
Right.
But just being able to put out consistent content, make sure it's always quality, edit twice, edit 3 times, do whatever it takes to make sure you don't mess up on anything too big. That's a big one. And my big thing is just to find a way, if you want to be in racing, find a way to get to the track.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be NASCAR. The big things I learned early on, I did some stuff for Speed 51. And for my blog, I would go to a short track.
Right.
It didn't have to be anything. One of my first races I ever covered was an iCar modified race at Angola Motorsports Park. I don't know too many people that know of either of those things, the place or the series. It's a pretty local country track up in north central Indiana. And the iCar Modifieds pretty much only run in like the little Midwest area.
I've heard of those. Haven't heard of the track. So
yeah, like that was one of the first races I covered, and those races are never going to get you the huge views unless you're somebody like, if you do super late models, you kind of can. You can establish a niche or something like that. Like I look at like Matt Weaver, for example, with short track scene. But the thing that those tracks will get you is just knowledge and experience. There aren't a lot of PR reps there. You have to chase everything yourself. You know, the top 5 line up on the front stretch, and you have to go out there and interview them yourself if you want to talk to them and get quotes.
Right.
You got to transcribe it yourself. We're kind of blessed in NASCAR. A lot of stuff.
Oh,
gets
that was
sent
the
to
first
us by
thing
the
when I
reps.
started doing NASCAR. That was like, holy cow, they transcribe it for you?
Yeah. And
actually, the first one for me was the media site because I didn't have access to the media site the first time. And so I'm like there with my tape recorder trying to record everything. And then I get access to the media site. It's like, I don't need this in the media center. That's great.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, do that stuff, get experience, and then when you get to the big track, like when you get to NASCAR or an IndyCar race or something like that, introduce yourself, ask questions, make your presence known.
Right.
And just do a good job. You don't have to start a bunch of drama. You don't have to act crazy. Just if you are doing good work, introducing yourself to the right people, asking the right questions, doing the right thing, people will catch on after a while. I mean, I didn't do anything other than that, and maybe some of that's even up for debate. But if you're making an effort to be there, the people notice, and if you're doing a good job, people are going to notice.
Right.
And those are really the 2 biggest keys to me.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going into Bristol next weekend. It's the Bass Pro Shops NRA night race. Aaron, I told you beforehand, we usually do, James and I do picks. I'll give you first run at it. Who do you think is going to win the thing?
I mean, this
now,
is
I will tell you, we've kind of been avoiding the big 3 because they win everything. But you're new here. You can go ahead and
can I
pick
give
from
a
the big 3 if you want.
3 and a non-big 3?
Go for it. Well, we usually do a pick and a dark horse.
Can I do a big 3, a non-big 3, and then a legit dark horse?
Perfect. Works for me.
So big 3, Kyle Busch.
Yeah,
he
I'm
just
with you
swept
there.
this weekend last year. I can't not pick Kyle Busch.
I think you have to pick Kyle Busch anytime you go to
He's
Bristol.
points leader.
Yeah.
He's dominant. If he would have been the one out front there toward the end of the race, he probably could have held on to it too. Like
Right.
he's just Kyle Busch is an insane talent, so I think he's hard to pick against at a track like that. If you want one outside of the big 3, I'm kind of keeping my eye on the Penske guys. I don't know. The easy thing to do would be to go and say Eric Jones because he ran so strong there last year.
Right.
And he's obviously, I would say, been running better
Yeah.
recently. He's kind of.
Except for today.
Yeah. Well.
Today was a rough day.
Yeah. I don't know if the second crash was his fault
No.
per se, but first one was him. He spun out on his own. Yeah. I would say I'm leaning toward a Penske guy. I've been waiting on Brad Keselowski to get that big win.
Right.
And he's been good at Bristol in the past. He's always been good at short tracks in general. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on Keselowski this weekend. I think we saw how close he was today. We know he wants to win. He was talking about that up there on the podium. So I think he really wants to win one. And if he's in position, I think he can make it happen. And if you want a dark horse, it's almost too easy of a dark horse pick now because he's kind of shown his hand there a few times. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is really good at Bristol. He's just, I don't know what it is about Roush and him there, but there's been 2 or 3 times he's had himself top 2, top 3 with a chance to win if circumstances fall right. So he's one to watch. And if he gets a chance, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ricky put the bumper to somebody because he's in the position that like an Austin Cindric was in at Canadian Tire last year. He needs that win, and he needs it now if he's going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, if he's within bumper's reach, he's winning that race. I'm with you there.
Yeah. If I were in his shoes, I would do it.
I like those. It works out too good also because you didn't pick anybody we picked. So I had James send me picks. James picked Joey Logano for the winner, so he went Penske route as well. Matt DiBenedetto is his dark horse.
Matty D,
he's really dark on
he's
that
leaning
one,
back on that BK racing run, huh?
Yeah, there you go.
It could happen.
Yeah. I went Kyle Larson on it. Kyle's been good at Bristol. He's due to come back and turn some things around. He's been struggling the past couple of weeks. And dark horse, I went Darrell Wallace Jr. He had a good battle up front in the spring, I think it was, right? Was it spring or last year? I don't remember.
I think it was before. Was it before the rain?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I was there.
Yeah.
Because I had to drive home after the rain out. So, yeah, I think he had a span early, like mid-race there, where he actually like got up to the lead even.
Yeah.
And was actually up front, and then he kind of faded over the second half. But
he can be in the right place at the right time.
He's had a couple good runs.
He's another one, too. You get the bumper to him. He's going to go for it, I think. I think that's it then, Aaron. I appreciate you stopping by. Where can they find you on Twitter if they want to find you?
Say this, pick a social media, look up Aaron Bearden 93. It's not a driver, it's my birth year. Because some real estate agent in California has Aaron Bearden for everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look up Aaron Bearden 93 on whatever. You can find me, send me stuff, tell me I suck. It's great. It's a ton of fun. I'm sorry in advance for the puns, but I do my best. I tweet too much, and hopefully you enjoy me.
There you go. Mine's an attorney. There's an attorney with my name, and there's a baseball player and a wrestler. So it's tough. It's tough to find. So I'm T Super Speedway on Twitter. You can find find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thesuperspeedway. You can find us on our website, www.thesuperspeedway.com. You're at kickingthetires.com. Is that the website? .net. There you go.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. You can find our podcast on Super Speedway as well as any other articles and things. We've got a bunch of coverage from Michigan this weekend, some photos and things like that. So, Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man, thank you for your time, Eric. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem. It was a good time. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll be back next week.